Let me join your crew. With that stunning closing statement by the enigmatic Nico Robin, Eiichiro Oda capped off one of the greatest manga epics of all time. Alabasta, the first great arc in One Piece, showcases Oda at his very best. The weekly manga format is as freeing as it is challenging. Truthfully, the only limit to any story is the imagination of the mangaka themselves. For 63 chapters, Oda transcends the medium of manga, throwing the Straw Hat crew into previously unseen perils. This is the arc where Luffy not only experiences his first serious loss, but he's beaten soundly, twice. Vivi, a fan favorite, goes from a sniveling, suicidal expat to one of the most courageous, gracious female leads to have ever been in Weekly Shonen Jump. Nico Robin, originally introduced as an antagonist, morphs into a complex, heliocentric anti-villain while barely saying a word. Important lore such as Pluton and poneglyphs are introduced as early as this arc. For the first time in years, Luffy is reintroduced to his older brother, Ace, and the seeds of many of the major events over the next 20 years are planted in the once fertile sands of Alabasta. When you think of manga, One Piece immediately comes to mind. While the series has always been a runaway hit, the critical acclaim wasn't always a constant. For the first 3 years of One Piece's serialization, it hovered within the top 5 of TOC constantly and had a number of color leads. Toei Animation had secured the production rights for the One Piece anime from 1999, and the show was well received in Japan. But it wasn't lauded. For the first 150 chapters, Mugiwara were mostly nautical. The character design, while goofy, was endearing, and the cast themselves were pretty vibrant. Banter was natural, sharp, and executed as well as any 90s sitcom that came before it. But the plot? These characters weren't the problem, but the world was. Stakes in One Piece were very low, as nobody was being killed off. Now, not every shonen manga needs to be grim, dark, and gloomy, but remember the time that Alabasta arc came out. Berserk had already done the eclipse. Monster was in its final arc, with 20th Century Boys just gaining momentum. Rave Master, Stone Ocean, Fruits Basket, and Naruto were just getting started. On the anime front, Hunter x Hunter, GTO, and Excel Saga were already making waves globally. Hell, Toei's other ongoing shonen at the time, Digimon, had a much bigger impact than One Piece on a global level. Basically, anything that One Piece was good at, you can find in another anime or manga done a lot better. Pirates are fun, but the story up to that point was as aimless as the big blue sea around our cast. When Oda docks the Straw Hats onto the dusty shores of Alabasta, a change was immediately noticeable. For all of his strengths, Oda is at his best when given the opportunity to reskin his characters and location. Alabasta is the start of Oda embracing that freedom. For the first time since the series debuted, One Piece isn't nautical. The very locale impacts Luffy directly in battle, and the current state of Alabasta ties into reveals that happen some 800 chapters later. Oda uses the new arc as the opportunity to increase political stakes. Vivi reveals to the crew that Crocodile, seen as a hero to the people, is villainous in nature and intends to take over the kingdom. Mr. 2 Bonclay of Baruch Works encounters the Straw Hats and reveals his power to steal the identity of anyone he touches. Already, you can tell Oda is approaching this arc very differently from the ones past. Mr. 2 Bonclay's introduction is an iconic moment in One Piece, and the exasperated expressions of the crew still rings loudly for me all these years later. But it's Ace's introduction into the series, alongside a quick bar skirmish between Smoker, Luffy, and Ace, that swiftly elevates this arc to legendary status. Ace's presence is brief, but the magnitude is huge. At this point in the manga, power scaling was difficult as Devil Fruit wasn't fully developed yet. And of course, there was no Haki, at least not how we understand it today. But Smoker and Ace, Logia users with much more battle experience than the Mugiwara crew, are able to, through small glimpses, telegraph just how powerful they are and how far behind Luffy still is. As I mentioned earlier, the banter between characters is at an all-time high during Alabasta. Luffy and Vivi have a serious conversation about the current state of her country and what the appropriate methods are going forward. Both sides present strong points, but it's the pushback and affirmative stance that Luffy takes against Vivi's manic and desperate behavior that really stood out to me. Luffy isn't the most developed shonen protag, but his belief system and loyalty to his friends and their causes makes him an honorable character. Oda also writes Usopp and Zoro quite strongly during this arc. They're such great bros, but each person has a unique voice and communicate differently amongst each other. Zoro's tone towards Luffy is one of a consigliere, to Usopp a concerned co-worker, Sanji annoyed and adversarial. When Nami appears on screen, she has so much to say, and her contributions actually feel significant. At this time, Nami wasn't being drawn like Mao Hamasaki, so there was purpose for her to appear on the pages of the manga. Her realization of her weakness in battle causes her to ask Usopp to help develop a weapon. Climb Attack not only doubles as a tool that elevates a lagging character to near equal heights as the other supporting cast, but it empowers several members of the crew. Even if Usopp or Nami or Chopper aren't as strong as the rest, there are still elements of the plot for them to contribute and be a part of. This was one of Oda's best strengths as a writer pre-Time Jump. One Piece art has always been polarizing. I wouldn't call Oda a master of the visual aspect to manga, not at all. But he understands scope and scale and framing to a degree that most other artists won't ever develop. As such, he can manipulate how a character looks to determine how meek, sexy, dangerous, or cute they are without it clashing with the previously existing cast. When Crocodile is introduced, it's clear that he's a very large person. One Piece is now known for its comically inane heights for characters, but when Crocodile first showed up, this was terror. His slick back hair, cigar, hook for a hand, and overcoat draped over his shoulders indicated that this villain was going to be a force that the Straw Hats had yet to encounter. During Luffy and Crocodile's first battle, Oda draws an iconic silhouette of Crocodile piercing Luffy and holding him up, proclaiming how weak he is. This was chilling. And let me tell you, as a 10-year-old boy when I first read that chapter, and as a 30-year-old man going over it again, it still rocks me to my core. The second battle equally as so, where Crocodile, once again, holds up a deflated Luffy off the precipice of the Alabasta Palace Plaza. The inventiveness of not only the combat during this arc, but the tribulations that the Straw Hats go through is breathtaking. Zoro, battered and bloodied by his opponent's blades, is finally able to cut through steel. Nami shocks her way to a well-earned victory. Vivi's suicidal mentality morphs into a staunch bravery. Luffy learns to not just rely on his impervious nature from his gum-gum fruit, and even harnesses water as a means to combat his opponent's devil fruit. Oda's imagination runs wild at all times, and he illustrates the Straw Hats at their finest. The final act of Alabasta not only makes this arc a weekly Shonen Jump classic, but it also solidified Oda as one of the brightest writers on the scene at the time. The third battle between Luffy and Crocodile is a slugfest for the ages. Desperation is seen in every panel from both characters. Luffy, knowing that the whole kingdom is only moments away from decimation. Crocodile, realizing that the young upstart who he had discarded of twice already has quickly grown to match and surpass his level. At the same time, the political plot between the kingdom and the rebels pays off perfectly. Oda was better at B and C plots at this point in his career. When we pull away from Luffy, we're still engaged with the story regardless of who the focus is on. Pell's sacrifice over the skies of Alabasta is, again, one of Oda's finest moments as a writer. A minor character, a bird, brought tears to my eyes. The collective effort of all these individuals kept the nation safe, and a simple character offering themselves for the greater good showed that Oda was finally ready to subvert expectations and bring One Piece up to speed with his peers. But, of course, Oda does what he does, and he doesn't quite commit to the sensational highs that he himself has set. One of his greatest flaws as an author is that he doesn't kill anyone, nor commit to death. Flashback death is whatever, but in-the-moment sacrifices mean absolutely nothing in early One Piece. Also, Oda's Easter eggs are a meme at this point. I feel that it was during Alabasta when his imagination would occasionally fly too close to the sun. Setup that doesn't reveal itself for years on end isn't clever writing, and it's unfortunate that it only becomes more persistent as the series goes on. These two writing flaws, while minor at the time, bring this arc down a bit in comparison to what Oda would do later on. And while I love the turn of direction with his aesthetic at this point, and his new eagerness to incorporate fused weapons and location manipulation in battle, I felt that his pen didn't mature until some years later. Reading Alabasta today can be pretty hard to get through at times. With the Alabasta arc, Eiichiro Oda increased the stakes of the Mugiwara crew and brought the reader along for a fantastic journey that combined everything that he is so talented at into a brisk, high-octane, cerebral, and emotional story that will stand the test of time. While I am a completionist when it comes to manga, I think Alabasta is a great jumping on point for the series if you have a very baseline understanding of what One Piece is, but you find the sheer amount of volumes to be intimidating. Alabasta is a weekly Shonen Jump greatest hit.